Why do some desires seem to cross the border of the invisible and materialize before us, while others dissipate like smoke? This question echoes in every person who has experienced the strange sensation of thinking intensely about something, and shortly after, seeing it appear in their life in an unexpected way. The phenomenon is not limited to superstition or coincidence. It touches on a delicate border between science, perception, and mystery. Quantum manifestation proposes that the universe is not just a static stage, but a living field of possibilities in which consciousness acts as a creative force. Imagine that each thought is a wave propagating in multiple directions. Some dissipate quickly, others find resonance and begin to attract events, people, and circumstances that vibrate at the same frequency. It is as if the external world were a sensitive mirror, reflecting not only what is desired, but above all what is believed, felt, and sustained in silence. When looked at through this lens, perceiving desires becoming reality ceases to be something magical and becomes part of a subtle process of interaction between mind and matter. However, this is not a promise of instant results, nor a formula for absolute control over life. It is rather an invitation to understand how the human gaze shapes the field of possibilities. By exploring this perspective, it becomes possible to realize that every true desire is born accompanied by a responsibility to align thoughts, emotions, and actions coherently. What manifests is not the result of mere wanting, but of a state of presence that tunes the individual to the hidden order of reality. This leads us to the central journey, to investigate how the mind acts as a creative field, what role observation, emotions, and the unconscious play in this process, and how subtle signs and synchronized experiences reveal that quantum time is not linear, but malleable. Throughout this exploration, we will touch on both metaphors and verifiable elements of daily life, so that manifestation ceases to be a distant abstraction and becomes a conscious practice of inner and outer transformation. Thinking is more than an internal activity without consequence. Every thought carries a vibration, a frequency that, although invisible, impacts the way we perceive and interact with reality. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have spoken of the mind as a creative force, but only in recent decades have we begun to understand, even partially, how science can shed light on this phenomenon. When we talk about quantum manifestation, we are not suggesting that the mind creates objects out of nothing in an act of magic, but that there is an interdependence between mental states and the possibilities of the physical world. One way to understand this interdependence is to think of the universe as an ocean of potentials. Just as the sea holds countless waves in gestation, reality also contains an infinity of latent possibilities. What determines which wave rises and which fades is related to the observation, attention, and energy we invest in certain thoughts. The mind, in this sense, functions as a selective lens. It magnifies certain potentials while leaving others in the background. This does not mean we can control every aspect of life, but that we actively participate in the flow of probabilities. Neuroscience helps explain this process. The brain not only records experiences, it also creates expectation maps. When someone believes in a certain possibility, the brain organizes perceptions, emotions, and behaviors around that belief. It is as if the mind were drawing preset pathways that facilitate the materialization of certain experiences. A person who constantly cultivates thoughts of scarcity tends to find confirmation of that view in daily details, while another, who sustains an openness to abundance, perceives opportunities that would go unnoticed by others. This cognitive filter is not illusory. It changes decisions, attitudes, and even how other people respond. If we think in quantum terms, the mind can be compared to a field of interference. Waves of thought, emotion, and intention overlap, creating patterns that repeat until one of them strengthens and becomes concrete experience. This repetition is crucial. A sporadic desire rarely finds enough strength to shape reality, while a sustained intention, accompanied by coherent emotion, acts like a continuous current that reorganizes probabilities. That is why dreams kept in silence and nurtured over time often end up revealing themselves even when we no longer consciously remembered them. There is also a collective aspect to this dynamic. The individual mind does not act in isolation, but within a network of interconnections. Similar ideas emerge in different parts of the planet. Social movements rise almost simultaneously in different cultures. Inventions appear in parallel. This phenomenon suggests that the human mind connects to a larger, shared field, in which thoughts and intentions meet and reinforce one another. Thus, manifesting a desire is not only a private act, it is also a tuning into greater currents that flow through collective consciousness. However, care must be taken not to turn this concept into blind idealism. Positive thinking alone does not guarantee results. The mind as a creative field requires coherence between intention and action. An individual may visualize prosperity every day, but if their actions are based on fear and retraction, the field created will be contradictory. The creative power does not lie in isolated thoughts, but in the congruence established when mind, emotion, and body move in the same direction. At this point, manifestation ceases to be just an idea and becomes effective practice. A practical example: someone wants to change careers. If the person only thinks about it loosely, the idea may generate momentary enthusiasm, but will hardly create real conditions for change. However, when that intention is nurtured with mental clarity, when emotions of confidence accompany the desire, and concrete actions, such as studying, networking, or freeing up time in the schedule, are taken, the mind begins to act as a catalyst. Small opportunities arise, unexpected conversations prove significant, and the life scenario gradually reorganizes itself. In this process, the mind does not create the new career out of nothing, but generates the field that attracts, connects, and sustains the necessary elements for transformation. Another interesting aspect is that the creative mind does not work only with conscious desires. Much of what we manifest is related to unconscious patterns we repeat without noticing. If someone believes, even silently, that they do not deserve to be happy or are not capable of achieving something, that invisible pattern projects into the mental field and acts as a barrier. The mind creates both from what we desire and from what we fear or deny. Recognizing this double movement is essential to understand why some desires never seem to materialize. They collide with deeper, more resistant fields. Thinking of the mind as a creative field, therefore, means realizing that each thought is not an isolated island, but a wave participating in a greater ocean. What we nurture with attention, emotion, and action takes form, while what we neglect tends to dissipate. This process is not instantaneous, but cumulative. It is like a work built brick by brick, until one day it reveals itself clearly and seems to those looking from outside a sudden event. When we understand this creative nature of the mind, we begin to relate differently to our own thoughts. They cease to be just internal echoes and become instruments of construction. Life stops seeming like a set of accidents and begins to be seen as a field in constant dialogue with what we project and sustain within. This change in perception does not eliminate challenges, but offers a new way of inhabiting them. Instead of victims of chance, we become conscious co-authors of the scenario in which we live. Observation is often understood as something passive. To look, record, take mental note of what happens around us. But when seen from a quantum perspective, observing is a creative act, a direct intervention in the field of possibilities. Modern physics has brought intriguing clues about this by revealing that subatomic particles behave differently when measured. The mere fact of being observed changes the outcome. Although this phenomenon should not be interpreted simplistically, it suggests that the human gaze is not neutral. It influences, organizes, and even limits what manifests. If we accept this premise, observing ceases to be just a contemplative act and becomes a choice of focus. Where I place my attention, I also place energy. A desire that remains only as a daydream, visited sporadically, rarely gains strength. A desire that receives constant observation, however, begins to acquire clearer contours. It is like a photograph being developed in a dark room. The longer the exposure to light, the clearer the image becomes. In daily life, this can be seen simply. Think of someone who decides to buy a specific car model. Before the decision, that car seemed almost non-existent on the streets. After the choice, it appears everywhere, multiplying on every corner. This does not mean the number of vehicles increased, but that observation became directed. The brain, tuned to the new focus, selects what was previously outside perception. This mechanism explains how, by observing with intentionality, we create fields of reality in which certain elements stand out and become more accessible. Observation also carries a silent quality of confirmation. When we pay attention to something, our body responds with micro-adjustments. Muscles orient, breathing shifts, emotions move. This internal synchrony communicates to the environment that we are available to interact with the object or situation observed. If we apply this to the process of manifestation, we will see that observing a desire is not just imagining it abstractly, but tuning into it, allowing the body and mind to adjust to its possibility. However, there is a crucial difference between observing with presence and observing with anxiety. Anxiety fragments the field, creating noise and instability. It is like trying to focus on a star with a telescope trembling in your hands. The image never stabilizes. Creative observation requires calm, patience, and surrender. It means sustaining the gaze without hurry, allowing the possibility to reveal itself in due time. Often, it is in this space of stillness that the clearest signs arise, as if reality were responding to the silent invitation of full attention. Another fundamental aspect is that observation not only illuminates the observed object, but also transforms the observer. When directing our gaze toward a specific desire, we are forced to confront beliefs, fears, and inner contradictions. Observing the idea of prosperity, for example, may bring up memories of scarcity or feelings of unworthiness. In this sense, observation acts as a mirror. It not only projects intention outward, but also reflects back to the individual the internal patterns that need to be recognized and transformed. This reciprocity makes the practice of observation a tool for deep self-knowledge. There is also the dimension of shared observation. When two or more people focus their attention on the same possibility, the field of manifestation intensifies. Entire communities have organized around common visions, transforming hostile environments into fertile spaces. The power of collective focus lies in mutual reinforcement. Each observer extends the reach of the intention, generating a network that strengthens materialization. This logic repeats itself in study groups, artistic movements, and even social causes that expand because many people chose to look in the same direction. It is not about obsessively monitoring a desire or expecting it to arise as a result of rigid control. Observing is different from watching. Watching is trying to hold, control every detail, and suffocate the possibility with excessive pressure. Observing, on the other hand, is to accompany, nurture, recognize subtle signs. It is being attentive to how life responds, without demanding that the response follow exactly the mental script created. This difference is essential, because while surveillance closes the field, conscious observation opens space for the unexpected to manifest. An example can illustrate. Imagine someone who wants to live a more harmonious relationship. If this person only monitors their encounters, analyzing every word of the other in search of confirmations or mistakes, they create tension and push away flow. But if they observe themselves during these encounters, their posture, tone of voice, openness to listen, they begin to notice subtle changes. Small internal adjustments modify the relationship dynamic. In this case, observation becomes a transformative act, capable of altering the interactive field and opening space for a more aligned experience. The role of observation, therefore, is twofold. On one hand, it shapes what stands out from the ocean of possibilities. On the other, it reveals what we carry within. Quantum manifestation only becomes tangible when we understand that looking is choosing. We not only choose what we see, but also how we see it. This daily choice, seemingly simple, is one of the most powerful forces in the creation of reality. Thus, learning to observe is not only to direct the eyes, but to educate attention, cultivate presence, and align the gaze with what we truly desire. In doing so, not only do desires become closer, but we ourselves become more whole, capable of recognizing that reality responds in the same measure that we know how to sustain it with a clear and confident gaze. If thoughts function like seeds cast into the field of possibilities, it is emotions that irrigate that soil and allow something to truly sprout. The mind can conceive countless ideas, but without the corresponding emotional force, they remain fragile, like sketches that never leave the page. Quantum manifestation rests on this link. Desire does not gain power merely because it was formulated, but because it is imbued with feeling. Emotions can be seen as electric currents running through the body, mobilizing vital energy. When a person desires something with emotional conviction, that energy creates a magnetic field capable of attracting compatible experiences. This is not just a poetic metaphor. When the human body feels an intense emotion, it releases hormones, adjusts heart rate, and alters breathing patterns. These physiological signals, in turn, modulate the brain and reorganize perception. Emotions coherent with the intention enhance clarity, while contradictory emotions generate confusion and block the process. An everyday example illustrates this. Imagine someone who wants a job opportunity. If that desire is accompanied by a constant fear of failure, the predominant emotion becomes an obstacle. The body closes up, posture conveys insecurity, and the mind sees risks in every possibility. This energy not only weakens manifestation, it also communicates a signal of retraction to the environment. On the other hand, if the desire comes accompanied by genuine enthusiasm, confidence, and anticipatory gratitude, the body expands. The voice gains firmness, expression conveys openness, and the gaze becomes more receptive. This vibration changes the interaction with others and increases the chances that the opportunity will materialize. The link between emotion and manifestation can also be understood through the notion of coherence. When heart and mind move in the same direction, energy concentrates in a continuous flow. Several studies on emotional states show that feelings like appreciation, compassion, and joy produce more stable physiological patterns, facilitating internal balance. This stability works like fuel to sustain intentions over time. To desire without emotion is like lighting a flame without providing oxygen. It goes out before it can illuminate any space. It is important to emphasize, however, that this is not about repressing emotions considered negative. Anger, sadness, or fear also carry powerful energy. What determines their effect is the way they are recognized and channeled. When denied, these emotions turn into noise, creating turbulence in the field of manifestation. When accepted and understood, they can be converted into a force for change. Anger, for example, can propel someone out of inertia to seek new solutions. Sadness can open space for introspection and reveal more authentic desires. In this sense, manifestation does not require artificial positivity, but an honest relationship with what we feel. Another relevant aspect is the intensity of emotion. It is not always necessary to feel euphoric enthusiasm to manifest something. Often, a deep serenity, accompanied by quiet confidence, is more effective than fleeting emotional peaks. Propulsive energy does not depend only on the height of the flame, but on its constancy. Coherent emotions sustained over time create a stable field in which desire can flourish. The practice of cultivating aligned emotions involves small daily choices, paying attention to what sparks joy, what generates inspiration, and what brings a sense of purpose, allows you to continually refuel the emotional field. This does not mean avoiding challenges, but seeking anchoring points that keep body and mind in tune. By identifying moments of genuine gratitude or simple pleasure, we strengthen the ground in which our desires can grow. Emotions also have the capacity to expand the perception of time. When we are connected to a deep feeling, the experience seems to gain density, as if the present became broader. This state of presence favors manifestation because it concentrates energy in the now, instead of scattering it in worries about the past or anxiety about the future. Thus, emotion works as a lever that fastens the mind to the creative instant, where probabilities truly transform into reality. A practical example can help visualize this. Suppose someone wants to write a book. If the idea remains only on the mental plane, the project will likely be postponed indefinitely. But when the person begins to feel enthusiasm at the thought of readers being touched by the work, when they experience anticipatory gratitude for the process of writing, and when they are moved by envisioning the contribution they can offer the world, the field changes. Emotion creates a magnet that attracts discipline, creativity, and meaningful encounters. The book ceases to be an abstraction and begins to become an inevitable path. Finally, it is important to understand that emotional energy is not restricted to the individual. It is transmitted and reverberates in environments. We have all experienced entering a space charged with tension and feeling the weight in our body, or being in a place full of joy and being infected by that vibration. In the same way, desires imbued with emotion do not remain locked inside the one who feels them. They communicate, create connections, and find resonance in other people. This relational dimension amplifies the power of manifestation and shows that we are not isolated, but embedded in a living fabric of mutual influences. Emotions, therefore, are not just automatic responses to external stimuli. They are tools of creation, forces that shape how we move and how the world responds. By recognizing their role as propulsive energy, we become aware that each feeling is a choice of direction. Cultivating emotions consistent with our desires is not an exercise in make-believe, but a way of aligning body, mind, and reality in the same creative flow. Desiring something is natural. From an early age, we learn to formulate wants: a toy, an achievement, a relationship, a life change. But wanting, by itself, does not guarantee that the object of desire will manifest. There is an essential difference between wanting and being aligned. Wanting often arises from impulse, comparison, or lack. Alignment, however, arises from a deeper tuning in which mind, body, and emotions vibrate in coherence with what is desired. It is at this point that manifestation ceases to be a frustrating expectation and becomes a real possibility. Isolated wanting tends to be mental. It is like a request cast to the wind, without roots and without support. A person may assert that they want prosperity, but if their daily thoughts are steeped in fear, their emotions dominated by insecurity, and their actions guided by scarcity, the field created does not correspond to the declared intention. The desire remains an idea disconnected from practical life. Alignment, by contrast, requires consistency. It means the desire is not just in the mind, but resonates in the emotions, in choices, and even in everyday gestures. This contrast can be understood through the metaphor of an orchestra. Wanting is like a musician playing alone, issuing an isolated melody. Alignment is the full symphony, where each instrument contributes in harmony to the same theme. When body, emotion, and mind resonate together, the field of manifestation becomes clearer. Reality, sensitive to these vibrations, responds more clearly. An example helps to visualize this. Imagine someone who wants to move to another city in search of a fuller life. Wanting may generate initial enthusiasm, but if that person spends their days mentally reinforcing the risks of the change, feeding anxiety about the unknown, and maintaining habits that bind them to their current place, the movement does not happen. The desire encounters internal and external blockages. When there is alignment, the energy is different. The thought of moving comes accompanied by emotions of confidence and freedom. The body prepares for the new, and practical actions begin to reflect that decision. In this case, unexpected doors open, encounters become meaningful, and the flow of events facilitates the transition. Being aligned also means reviewing motivations. Often, wanting arises from comparisons or external pressures. We desire something because we see other people possessing it, or because we believe that achievement will bring recognition. But when the motivation is external, the field created tends to be unstable. Alignment requires honesty. What truly moves this desire? When the answer is connected to internal values and a sense of purpose, manifestation gains strength. The universe seems to respond more clearly when the desire expresses a deep truth rather than a need for approval. Another important point is the congruence between speech and practice. How many times does someone claim to want health, yet maintain habits that compromise it, or desire abundance, yet act with distrust in the face of every opportunity? Alignment reveals itself precisely in day-to-day life, in the seemingly small choices that sustain or sabotage the field of manifestation. Each gesture becomes a silent vote for or against the desire. When these votes are coherent, life reorganizes in consonance. It is common to confuse intensity of wanting with strength of manifestation. Someone may desire something with great anxiety and believe that this intense wanting is already enough. But anxiety actually reveals misalignment. It shows that instead of trust, there is doubt. Instead of surrender, there is attachment. Alignment is not measured by the level of pressure, but by the serenity that accompanies the desire. When there is alignment, the individual feels peace even before manifestation, as if already in contact with the desired reality. This peace is a sign that body, mind, and emotion are vibrating in unison. Being aligned also involves accepting timing. Impatient wanting demands immediate results, often without internal preparation. Alignment recognizes that every desire needs maturation, just as a seed needs time to sprout. This maturation is not only external, but internal. While the desire organizes itself in the field of possibilities, the person is transformed so as to become capable of receiving and sustaining the new reality. There is also the dimension of detachment. Wanting tends to generate fixation. It is like squeezing an object so tightly that you prevent it from moving. Alignment, on the other hand, allows you to let go. This does not mean giving up the desire, but trusting that it will be received in the proper flow. This detachment arises from an inner certainty that what is in resonance will come at the right moment. Curiously, many manifestations become possible precisely when we stop holding rigidly and begin to sustain only the tuning. To understand this difference in practice, it is enough to observe the moments when something desired came to pass. Most of the time, the result did not come at the height of anxiety, but when there was clarity, serenity, and coherence between intention and action. Isolated wanting produces tension, while alignment generates natural movement. When there is alignment, even challenges become part of the process, because the internal field is already prepared to receive what presents itself. Thus, true manifestation does not depend only on the strength of wanting, but on the quality of alignment. Genuine desires call for congruence, thinking, feeling, and acting in harmony. When this coherence is achieved, the field of possibilities ceases to be a distant abstraction and becomes fertile ground, ready to receive and materialize what is in tune. At that point, it is no longer just desire seeking reality, but reality itself moving to meet the desire. There are moments when life seems to play with our expectations. We think of a person and, shortly after, they get in touch. We make the decision to pursue a new path, and information or opportunities appear that seem tailor-made. These episodes are often called coincidences, but there is a significant difference when they carry meaning. It is at this point that we speak of synchronicity, events that, although they have no evident causal relationship, connect in a symbolic and revealing way, as if the universe were responding to a silent intention. Synchronicities function as points of intersection between the inner field and the outer field. They are signs that confirm or challenge our alignment. When we are in tune with a desire, the surrounding environment begins to reflect that vibration in small clues. It is not magic, but perception. By keeping our attention open, we notice connections that previously went unnoticed. A gaze trained to recognize signs turns everyday life into a living dialogue, in which each detail can carry a message. It is important to understand that signs do not appear to satisfy curiosity or as a spectacle. They arise as reminders that we are in constant dialogue with reality. A repeated number that stands out, a sentence that appears in a book at the exact moment we seek clarity, a person who crosses our path and brings unexpected information. All these examples are expressions of a subtle language in which chance gains meaning because it is in resonance with what we are living internally. Synchronicity can be compared to a river. When we are aligned, we enter the right current, and the flow leads us to encounters and circumstances that propel us. When we resist, swimming against that current, the signs keep appearing, but are often ignored or interpreted as obstacles. Recognizing the movement of the river requires sensitivity. It is not about expecting grand miracles, but about perceiving that small confluences carry direction. Many confuse signs with absolute guarantees. An unexpected encounter or a numerical sequence is not a promise of immediate results. They are indications, arrows along the way that suggest we are tuned in, or that we need to adjust our focus. Taking signs as final certainties can generate frustration. The healthiest posture is that of a learner. Observe, welcome, and interpret without haste, understanding that life speaks through multiple layers. What is fascinating is that signs not only point outward, but also function as an internal reflection. When something catches our attention, it is because there already exists within us a disposition to recognize that content. Synchronicity is, in this sense, a dance between subjectivity and the world. Desire projects vibration, and reality responds with symbols that, when observed, strengthen the original intention. It is a cycle in which each part feeds the other, as if the universe and the individual were co-creating a narrative together. A practical example can illustrate this dynamic. Imagine someone who wants to start a creative project. In the following days, this person encounters unexpected references on the theme, meets someone who works in the same area, and even dreams of situations related to the project. Each of these signs, taken in isolation, could be seen as chance. But, when gathered, they reveal a web of meanings that drives the decision. Recognizing this web not only strengthens the desire, but also gives the courage to act. Synchronicity also challenges the common sense of linear time. Often, a sign appears even before the conscious decision, as if reality were anticipating the movement. This inversion suggests that manifestation is not only the result of past causes, but of fields of possibility that already exist in the present. The sign, in this case, functions as an invitation. Are you ready to cross this door? The choice remains ours, but life offers clues so that we can walk with greater clarity. Cultivating sensitivity to signs requires presence. Being attentive does not mean hunting for signs obsessively, but opening up to notice what stands out from the common flow. When something resonates in an intense and symbolic way, it is worth pausing and asking, what does this tell me now? This simple gesture creates space for life to reveal itself as a companion, and not as an indifferent stage. At the same time, it is essential to check personal bias. Not everything that happens around us is a sign. The mind, anxious for confirmation, can project meanings where there is only noise. Distinguishing between illusion and genuine synchronicity is part of the practice. The criterion is not the grandeur of the event, but the feeling of internal resonance. When a true sign arises, we feel clarity, a kind of silent recognition that does not need logical explanation. Synchronicities and signs, therefore, are reminders that life is not only a mechanical sequence of facts, but also a symbolic weave that dialogues with our inner world. They do not replace action or effort, but serve as subtle compasses that help us navigate. By learning to recognize and honor them, we become more aware that we do not walk alone. The greater field of existence participates, responds, and accompanies us in the process of manifesting desires. And since we are speaking of signs, here is a direct invitation. If any synchronicity has ever changed the way you saw life, share that experience in the comments. Your story may be exactly the sign someone else needs today. And if this content made sense to you, like it now so that more people can find this flow of meaningful connections. Much of what we manifest does not spring from what we declare we want, but from what we silently carry in the unconscious. The conscious mind is like the tip of an iceberg, visible and active, capable of formulating desires, goals, and plans. The unconscious, however, makes up the immense submerged structure that guides choices, perceptions, and automatic responses. It is there that old memories, emotional patterns, and beliefs accumulate, things we often do not recognize but that silently shape the field of manifestation. When someone desires prosperity and repeats positive affirmations daily, they may believe they are creating a fertile field for that objective. However, if in their unconscious there are childhood records in which they repeatedly heard that money is dangerous or wealth drives good people away, these phrases remain as silent commands, programming limitations. The result is a contradictory field. On one hand, the conscious mind asks for abundance. On the other, the unconscious repels that same abundance as a threat. This conflict explains why so many people say they want something and yet seem to sabotage their own paths. The unconscious can be understood as a hidden programmer. Based on past experiences and conditioning, it defines which possibilities are considered safe or possible. Often, we repeat relationship patterns, professional trajectories, or even financial difficulties, not because we want to, but because the unconscious associates the new with risk. This programming, though invisible, functions like a hidden compass that diverts our course without our noticing. Recognizing this role does not mean seeing the unconscious as an enemy. On the contrary, it acts as a guardian of survival. The problem is that, by carrying old records without updating them, it continues to respond to the present as if it were the past. Thus, a criticism received at work can trigger childhood memories, awakening disproportionate feelings of inadequacy. This mechanism not only influences emotional reactions, but also shapes the possibilities the mind is willing to see. Quantum manifestation, in this sense, is not limited to declaring desires, but requires revisiting hidden programming. As long as we do not recognize unconscious patterns, they operate as invisible filters. The world may offer opportunities, but if the unconscious does not allow them, they go unnoticed. How many times does someone let a precious chance slip by simply because they do not perceive it as real? This phenomenon reveals that it is not the lack of external possibilities that prevents manifestation, but the internal block that decides what can or cannot be received. An example helps to understand. A person may claim to want to live a healthy relationship. However, if their unconscious holds records of abandonment or betrayal, they may end up repeatedly choosing unavailable partners. This pattern is not the result of bad luck, but of a hidden program that associates love with pain, creating a field that reproduces the same dynamic. Until that belief is recognized and transformed, manifestation will remain limited. The unconscious, however, is not a fixed destiny. It can be reprogrammed. Each time we bring a limiting belief to light, we make room to replace it with new references. The process begins with careful observation of automatic reactions. What makes me feel disproportionate fear? What makes me reject opportunities I myself said I wanted? These questions reveal the tracks of the hidden programmer. By making them conscious, we can offer the unconscious new experiences of safety and worth, expanding the field of manifestation. This transformation does not happen instantly, but through repetition and coherence. The unconscious needs to be convinced, not by the force of will, but by the consistency of new experiences. If previously it associated success with loneliness, for example, it needs to gradually experience that it is possible to have success without losing emotional bonds. Each small experience of coherence rewrites the internal code, creating new permissions for desires to become reality. It is interesting to note that the unconscious is also responsible for many signs we interpret as intuition. When we feel an inexplicable inclination to follow a certain path, it may be that the unconscious is gathering subtle information that the conscious mind did not perceive. This aspect shows that although it carries limitations, the unconscious is also a source of wisdom. It is a hidden programmer, but not only of blocks, it also holds the memory of everything we have already learned, functioning as a repository of silent solutions. Being attentive to the unconscious means understanding that to manifest is not limited to repeating phrases or visualizing images. It is to look within and recognize the voices that still echo from the past. Many of these voices were necessary at some point, but today have become barriers. By reframing them, we free energy that was previously trapped in fears and beliefs, and that energy can be directed to sustain more aligned intentions. Thus, the unconscious is not an adversary to be defeated, but a territory to be explored and updated. When we accept this role, we begin to understand why so many desires do not materialize and how we can adjust the field so that they become possible. To manifest in this context is also to reprogram what was silently inscribed, allowing the hidden programmer to stop repeating old codes and start collaborating with new realities. Time is usually understood as a straight line, the past behind us, the present at the point where we are, and the future ahead. This linear view, although practical for organizing everyday life, is limited when we think about quantum manifestation. From the quantum perspective, time does not behave rigidly. It is more like a flexible field in which different possibilities coexist and can be accessed from the state of consciousness. When someone desires something, they are not merely imagining a distant future. They are, in a certain way, establishing a connection with a reality that already exists in potential. This future does not need to wait years to take shape. It is already inscribed as a possibility in the field. Manifestation occurs when we create a bridge between the present and this latent future. The experience ceases to be mere projection and becomes tuning. An example helps to visualize this. Think of a radio station. All frequencies are present in the air at the same time, but we only hear the one to which the device is tuned. The future works in a similar way. Multiple versions already exist, but we connect only to the one whose frequency corresponds to our current state of consciousness. Thus, changing how we think, feel, and act is like turning the radio dial. By altering the tuning, we access a reality that previously seemed distant. This view challenges the belief that we need to wait for a desire to come true. Chronological time is necessary for certain processes to unfold. A plant needs weeks to germinate. A project needs months to take shape. But access to the possibility happens now. It is in the present that the link is established with what we want to experience. The future does not come to us from the outside. It emerges from how we align ourselves in the current instant. This malleability of time is perceived in common experiences. Moments of intense joy seem to pass quickly, while situations of anxious waiting drag on. What changes is not the clock, but the internal perception. The same happens with manifestation. When we are aligned, the sensation is that events flow more naturally, as if time organized itself in our favor. When we are misaligned, everything seems slow, heavy, and blocked. The relationship with time, therefore, is not only external, but deeply subjective. Another way to understand quantum time is to think of the idea of entanglement. Studies show that particles separated by great distances can react to each other instantly, as if space and time were not barriers. This phenomenon suggests that reality may be interconnected beyond what the linear view allows. Thus, when we connect to an intention with strength and clarity, it is possible that this intention reverberates immediately in distant fields, organizing circumstances that will only become visible later. Time, in this case, is not an obstacle, but the fabric through which possibilities are stitched. Many people report experiences in which a desire seemed to have been met even before being consciously formulated. Meeting someone who offers exactly the needed opportunity, receiving an unexpected answer at the exact moment one was thinking of a question, realizing that decisions in the past seem to have been made for something that would only make sense in the present. These episodes suggest that time does not follow only linear logic, but bends and reorganizes itself according to the coherence between intention and reality. The practice of dealing with quantum time requires a shift in posture. Instead of waiting for the future to bring the solution, it is necessary to live now, the internal state corresponding to what is desired. Those who seek peace, for example, cannot postpone it until after achieving certain goals. They need to cultivate peace in the present, for it is this cultivation that opens the necessary frequency for more harmonious situations to arise. The future manifests from the quality of the present. This does not mean ignoring the practical dimension of chronological time. Projects require stages. Relationships ask for maturation. Transformations demand perseverance. But by understanding time as a flexible field, we stop living in the logic of waiting and begin to live in the logic of creation. Instead of asking, when is this going to happen? The question becomes, how can I align myself now so that this possibility becomes accessible? This shift in perspective completely changes the relationship with desires. Quantum time also teaches about trust. Often, a desire does not come to pass at the expected moment, and this is seen as failure or frustration. However, it may be that the field is still organizing itself, or that the person needs to go through experiences that will prepare them to sustain what will come. In this sense, trusting time is not waiting passively, but recognizing that there is a broader intelligence operating beyond immediate control. Manifestation does not obey human clocks, but the coherence between the inner and outer fields. Thus, time ceases to be a hard line and reveals itself as a living space, in constant dialogue with consciousness. Manifesting desires is not only waiting for the future to bring answers, but learning to tune, in the present, the state that allows us to access them. Quantum time invites us to live more broadly, recognizing that the now contains both the traces of the past and the seeds of the future. Understanding concepts about mind, emotion, observation, and time opens important doors, but it is in practice that alignment becomes real. Manifestation does not happen only in the realm of ideas. It calls for daily living, small gestures that function as bridges between intention and reality. When we speak of alignment practices, we are not referring to rigid formulas or complicated rituals, but to simple ways of cultivating coherence among thought, feeling, and action. One of the first steps toward alignment is presence. Being present means inhabiting the moment without getting lost in an excess of past or future. Often, desires become unattainable because the mind is scattered, trapped in memories of failure or anxieties about what has not yet come. By cultivating presence, we create space for the field of possibilities to be accessed now. This state can be reached in brief moments by breathing consciously, observing bodily sensations, or paying full attention to a simple activity. Alignment begins when we stop running from the present and start inhabiting it fully. Another essential practice is clarity. Vague desires tend to generate diffuse results. Being aligned implies formulating intentions with sharpness, not in the sense of controlling every detail, but of knowing the essence of what is sought. Someone may say they want to be happy, but that statement is far too broad. When one investigates what happiness means at that moment, perhaps relating authentically, living in health, or cultivating creative freedom, the desire takes form. Clarity directs energy, avoiding dispersion. Emotions also need to be tended to in the alignment process. It is no use nurturing elevated thoughts while the body carries resentment or deep fear. The practice here involves recognizing what we feel without repression. When a dense emotion arises, alignment does not ask for denial, but for welcoming. Observing fear, naming it, allowing it to express itself consciously, all this helps release trapped energy. By releasing it, we make room for emotions more coherent with what we wish to manifest. This emotional care is like clearing the ground before planting new seeds. There is also the power of active imagination. To visualize is not to fantasize passively, but to create within an experience so sensory vivid that the body responds as if it were already real. The brain, when visualizing intensely, activates circuits similar to those that would be triggered by the concrete experience. This creates an anticipated memory that guides choices and increases confidence. When we imagine a desired future in rich detail, we are not merely dreaming. We are training the inner field to receive that reality. Another aspect of alignment is coherent action. Often, people believe it is enough to maintain positive thoughts and wait for life to respond. But manifestation happens at the meeting point between intention and practice. Action does not mean excessive effort or obsessive control, but concrete steps that sustain the intention. If someone wants to write a book, they need to sit down and write. If they want to cultivate health, they need to adjust habits that correspond to that desire. Each gesture materializes part of the field and communicates to the universe that we are ready to receive. Listening to signs is also part of alignment practices. The universe communicates in details, and learning to notice synchronicities helps adjust the route. Often, alignment does not call for major changes, but small corrections, a conversation that brings insight, an unexpected invitation, an inner feeling that suggests a different path. By welcoming these clues, we keep the tuning alive. The practice is to be available, without rigidity, allowing the flow to reveal directions. It is important to remember that alignment is not a permanent state. There are days of clarity and days of confusion, moments of confidence and moments of doubt. The secret lies in continuity. Just as a musician tunes their instrument regularly, we need to realign body and mind every day. This process should not be seen as failure, but as a natural part of the human experience. Each adjustment strengthens awareness and makes it easier to return to center. Gratitude also holds a central place. Being grateful does not mean passively accepting any situation, but recognizing the value of what is already present. Gratitude shifts attention from what is lacking to what already exists, broadening the perception of abundance. This change of focus not only elevates the emotional state, but also creates resonance with more expansive experiences. When we give thanks, we open space for life to bring even more reasons for appreciation. Finally, the practice of detachment completes the cycle. To align oneself is not to cling to the desire with anxiety, but to trust that it will find its way. Detachment does not mean giving up, but releasing the need to control every step. It is allowing manifestation to occur at the most suitable time and in the most suitable form. This gesture of trust dissolves tensions and keeps the field open. Often, it is precisely at the moment we let go that reality organizes itself in a surprising way. Alignment practices are not rituals far removed from ordinary life. They manifest in the way we breathe, in the care we take with what we feel, in the clarity of what we desire, in everyday choices, and in the trust we sustain. Each simple gesture, when done with awareness, reinforces the harmony between inner and outer. To align oneself is, in essence, to live coherently, allowing life to respond not only to what we think, but to what we are at each instant. Manifesting desires is not a trick, but a profound process of interaction between consciousness and reality. Along the way, we have seen that the mind functions as a creative field, that observation gives shape to the invisible, that emotions are fuel, and that inner alignment sustains the coherence needed for possibilities to become experiences. We have also perceived that the unconscious acts as a hidden programmer, that time is not only linear, and that simple practices can adjust our axis so that we are more receptive to the synchronicities and signs life offers. The great secret is to understand that manifestation does not mean imposing wills on the world, but learning to dialogue with it. Every true desire is a bridge. On one side, our intention. On the other, the field of possibilities. What unites these sides is how we think, feel, and act in the present. When we cultivate this coherence, reality ceases to seem like a random set of facts and reveals itself as a living weave in which we participate as co-creators. Arriving here is an invitation to see life with new eyes. Each thought, each emotion, each choice is a seed cast. The field responds not to what we ask for anxiously, but to what we sustain with clarity and presence. Manifestation, therefore, is not something that happens outside of us, but something that begins within, in the silent space where we align with who we truly are. And since you have walked with me to the end, I want to ask you for something special. Write in the comments the phrase, "I choose to align," so we know you made it this far. If this content touched you in any way, subscribe now to receive more reflections like this and continue exploring together the mysteries of quantum manifestation.